Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome. 4th of July, Independence Day. I don't know what that means in other countries, but we do celebrate it. So welcome this morning to another live Q&A here with me, Alan Thornhill, and I'm delighted to be joined this morning with Mark Cowan from Australia. Mark is a four-time Commonwealth Games technical official and a four-times World Championship official. He's also a colleague of mine on the World Bowls Laws Committee, and is the National Training Centre coach for Victoria and the little island Tasmania. So welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me on. And might I just say before you go any further, they have really enjoyed over here in Australia and New Zealand your webinars, and hopefully you do a few more of them. I know we've got quite a few forums on Facebook, but hopefully you keep these going because they're much better live, and we can certainly do with a few more of these around the world, mate. Great.
Yeah, it's thanks, Mark. It's an interesting process, and I wasn't sure whether to sort of take the leap and do it in the first instance, but I know how popular it's proved from doing these, and how it's been watched around the world. So it's great, and at the end of the day, all we're here to do is trying to help people understand a little bit more about the laws of the sport and the game itself. So thanks for that. So we got some questions coming in already, some people joining us late. So please, if you do want to ask a question, you'll find at the bottom of your Zoom window a little Q&A button. If you hit that, you can ask Mark and myself a question. Don't make them too hard. I've already got some stinkers, Mark, to get through. So we'll try and keep the ones that are coming in live a bit easier.
I'd expect nothing else.
Yeah. So good morning, David. Good to see you. Anne Wright from Christchurch. Welcome, Anne. It's late at night for you. Appreciate you joining on tonight from New Zealand. Very much appreciated. And Alex Duckworth. Do you remember Alex, Mark? Alex Duckworth.
Yeah, very much so.
He's wearing his Australian shirt in respect.
A very good man.
But he said we can start now because he's here, so we'll get going. So I guess the first thing really to ask you, Mark, is what sort of experiences you've had over the many years that you've been officiating. You are the Chief Technical Official for World Bowls 2020, whenever that's going to happen at some point in the future. But you've done a lot of very high profile events now, and I'll just give a sense of what your most memorable event was, and what you can remember from being the highlights.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a long journey, Alan. I think there's only about 6 of us left from Melbourne, I think, including yourself.
Yep.
That are still going around the 2020 time. So I suppose the biggest thing for me was just getting picked and getting part of the team. I think that was the most pleasing thing from my point of view. That the years you put in regard to officiating at club level and then state level, etc., and then getting picked for a Commonwealth Games was just that was the cake. And then luckily getting the men's singles final between Calvin Kirko and Robert Wheel was just the icing on it, and. But if you talk about memorable times, there's probably 2 I'd like to bring up to you. And one was at the 2006 Games, where the little black bugs would come out every night underneath the lights here out of Darebin. And, of course, we'd have to sweep them all off before play could start again. So they did that every night to us and put us on a hold. But I think nothing really compared us or got us ready for India.
Yeah,
that was
and the bugs.
Exactly right. Everything by the time you got there was just police with machine guns. On your bus, in your hotel lift, in the lobby, outside in the bunkers, and we couldn't even get into the venue unless The local bloke got the sergeant, got the lieutenant to let us in, you know. So it was just full on the whole time under close guard. So they were probably the two things from a Commonwealth Games point of view. Glasgow and the Gold Coast, the last two, even though they were terrific, they sort of paled in comparison in regard to any major problems or anything like that. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, the first two were pretty hairy.
Yeah, and I going back to Melbourne 2006. That was my my second trip to Australia. First with family, but my second trip to Australia, which was a fantastic experience. And you had to deal with a final there. I mean, I handed over the final baton to you from Manchester, having done that one in Manchester in the rain. And you had to deal with quite an interesting final, which had a fairly controversial ending in the end, with Kelvin celebrating and Robert and that whole handshake gate thing.
Yeah, well, you know, they say Robert was pretty upset that he hadn't come over and shook his hand. Of course, all the Australian squad come up and picked Kelvin up, took his shirt off and carried him around the venue. So, you know, Robert was waiting in the wings, waiting to shake his hand. So, yeah, look, you know, well, certainly no malice in it, but it was just the emotion of the time, and yeah.
And why not? I mean, you were there. I was there in Manchester. You know, the atmosphere in a final and the whole occasion of a final when it comes to the end is just incredible. And you know, I remember in Manchester, it took me probably 15-20 minutes to get the card signed because of the celebrations going on. So
in Melbourne, because of the Jacks had the logo on it, we had to pick up the Jacks all the time at the end of the match. And of course, getting the one after the final, because the Australian squad were everywhere, I had to dart in between everyone just to pick up the Jack, just to grab hold of it. And of course, then Kelvin wanted it then, so yeah, it was interesting times.
Yeah,
I actually even got my I don't know whether people can see, but my 2006 Melbourne jacket on. I tried it on this afternoon, mate. I'm really happy I could fit back into it. So after 14 years, it's going good.
I'm not sure I could do the same. That's great, yeah, and some fantastic memories working with you as well, and you know, at all the Commonwealths that we've done together. It's been a fantastic experience, and
I think very good groups as we come along. New people have come into it, and but yeah, you get to meet new friends and work with different umpires, and yeah, it's just great to be able to, you know, go anywhere in the world and either get put up at a house or go out for tea or whatever it is with the group of people that you meet over the journey, you know.
Yeah, that's great. We'll talk a little bit later about international technical officials and the process for that, because we've got them Birmingham 2022 coming up, touch wood. So we'll talk a little bit about the ITO process later on this morning, this evening. So welcome to everybody that's just joining. Some people coming in now. Again, if you want to ask Mark or myself a question, there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Just hit that, type in your question, and we'll answer it live for you. Alistair, good morning. Alan, good morning. Good afternoon, Mark. So welcome, Alistair. I assume that's Alistair Douglas. If it is, welcome. We've obviously both worked with Alistair before, Mark. So hi, boys. Good to see you smiling faces from Pam from Sydney. My adopted mum. It's my adopted mum. There's a question here from Carol for Mark, actually. So what is the different equipment used in Australia as opposed to elsewhere? I assume umpiring equipment. So is there any different equipment you use over there? Trammels.
Look, it's an interesting one, yeah. And you know, Alan, too well, that we have trammels over here, and they're a long steel bar that you put up against the bowl, and then from there, that goes out to the jack. The bar goes out to the jack, and you use calipers between the end of the trammel and the jack, and of course everything's steel and of course won't move. So even it takes a little bit longer to set up than the normal strings and long tape strings and all those sort of things, but we find it a lot more. What can I say? We find it a lot more easier and I suppose you don't like them, but that's not the point. But we find we can get a more accurate measure by it than any other piece of equipment we've got. So.
Just takes you all day to do it. That's all.
And look, it does take a bit of time, especially if you're in a 3 or 4 bowl measure, and it takes a while to get around it all and set it all up and all that. But as I say, being steel, there's no movement. It's certainly a more accurate measure, but yeah, it does take time. And that's probably the main difference. We have encapsulated most of the stuff from the UK, the box string and the string measure, the long tapes with the pieces on the end of them, that go the length of the groove and all that. So we are using them a little bit more, but we do tend to use our own equipment as well. 2 other pieces of equipment that you don't use overseas, and that's what we call our long tape. And we have an L-shaped frame with a tape that goes out instead of your long tape with the string over there. And we have a vernier on the end of it, which we, when we get near the jack, we just roll that out a little bit closer to the jack to get a slight feel. And that's one thing. And then we have another piece of equipment called the orbital, and that sits over the top of the jack. And Pam would love to say that it's a great piece of equipment, but most of the people in Victoria here hate it. So, but it's one of those ones that it goes over the jack and spins around, and you can pick a 3 or 4 bowl measure that way as well. So, yeah, we have a few different pieces of equipment. So,
I think I'm on Victoria's side with that one because placing anything over the jack is risky.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. You do run the risk of touching it.
Yeah. Good. So thank you for that question, Carol. And right, was an amazing experience in Delhi. Yes, it was an amazing experience. The heat as well. So thank you for that question. Just following on from equipment, there was just in terms of playing as well. There's a lot of discussion a moment about the bowling arms. They're becoming more popular around the world, but I understand in Australia they're pretty much used in tournaments, or there's specific tournaments that use them as well. So there was a question that came in, and the question was, are they just for players with disabilities, or can anybody use them? And they're the long arms that you pick the bowl up with, and you deliver the bowl with them. So
yeah. Look, it's one of those things where I suppose Australia has been the forerunner for bowling arms. Even Victoria alone, there was something like 16,000 bowling arms being used. And they were essentially designed for people who had disabilities that couldn't continue in the game. So they were, asked what could we do rather than finish up and not play anymore. So they invented the arm, and we came up with, well, people were going to use them, then they would need a medical certificate from the doctor to say, I can't continue bowls without it. So now it's got to a stage where, there was a lot of people at the time think they were cheat sticks and all that sort of stuff, and people were bowling better than them and all that sort of thing because they're getting beaten by them. But what they've done over here now in Australia is they've taken away the medical certificate side of it. So virtually anyone, who thinks that they can bowl better with it are allowed to bowl better with it, or allowed to bowl with it now. And those who still need it can still just go ahead and play with it. There's various rules about once you start with it, you must continue with it. You can't chop and change and those sort of things, or only bring it out for a drive or something like that. So once you do use it, you've got to use it for the whole game now.
Sure.
But look, you've got to weigh up whether it's the people can stay in the game, or suddenly you lose 16,000 people and not play at all. Now, we know there's a declining membership anyway, so the more you can help out and keep them in the game, the better.
Yeah. No.
And I haven't seen anyone yet, Alan, who have taken up a bowling arm and bowled better than what they did previously at a level. So if someone played at county level or state level here in Australia, I haven't seen them play for Australia by using the arm. They haven't gone up a notch. They may have gone back to the same level, but I haven't seen anyone go a better level than what they were originally.
Sure, yeah. Okay, interesting. Pam, no problems with the orbital measure unless you have shaky hands. Happy to give us a lesson. Yeah, thanks, Pam.
So do you have many bowling arms over there, Alan?
Yeah, we have a few. Yeah, but I think over here they're still really used predominantly by players with disabilities, bad backs and those sort of things. They're not sort of run of the mill able-bodied things. So we do see some, but they're pretty rare. I mean, to be honest, you know what our greens are like over here. Some of them are pretty heavy, so using the bowling arm on those, chuck
Still
it.
might like kids go take a few divots out of the ground. Maybe.
Yeah,
But we've even got to a stage where we've got an interstate competition. You know, Queensland plays Victoria. They have a round robin series against all the states. There's enough bowling arms to players to play an interstate competition. So that's how big it's got over here.
sure. And just as we were answering that, David White's come in with a question. My club has a player with a thumb joint issue that causes him to use the bowling arm on his backhand only. Is that okay? Well, I think, as you've just said, Mark, certainly in Australia, the regulation is that they play with it throughout the game, so they can't just pick and choose whether they can use it backhand, forehand for drive or whatever. So
no, because what we found over here was some ladies who might only have a small hand and playing with a size 0 or a size 1 suddenly got the bowling arm and playing with a size 4. You know, when they wanted to drive and all those sort of things. So, you know, there's a lot of contentious issues about playing with it. But in regard to that, David, I would say that it's up to the controlling bodies then to say, well, you must use it all the time, you know, and doesn't matter. You can't just pick and choose your backhand or your forehand or driving when you want to.
sure, yeah. Good. Sheila Beattie, welcome. Hi, Alan and Mark. Good to see you both. Sheila, we've worked with lots of times before, so welcome from Scotland. Another question from Mark. You're being popular today, Mark. From Stephen, question from Mark. Which is your favourite club and why? Oh, you've got so many to choose from over there.
Yeah, well, you know, you've been to a few of them, Alan, and look, some of the bigger clubs that are up on the eastern seaboard in New South Wales and Queensland, you know, they're just monstrous. Not only because they have 3 or 4 greens, but their club rooms, you know, run the whole length of the green, and they've got various rooms for not only the bar but pokies and all those sort of things. So some of them are fantastic. It's always great to go to Broadbeach. The weather's always good there.
Yep.
And that's where the World Championships are going to be, and it's where Com Games 218 were. Yeah, look, it's just a fantastic facility, and it's always nice to get up on the Gold Coast for a bit of warmth.
Yeah, too right.
Yeah, true.
Okay, a few more people coming in now, so welcome to everybody. Again, if you want to ask us a question, use the little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and pop a question into us, and we'll do our best to answer it live. We've got one that was submitted earlier, Mark, about leaving the green from Bill. And he's asked if there's a sudden downpour and just one bowl to play, is it permissible to leave a player on the rink and continue playing after the rain has gone? The simple answer to that, Bill, is no. It doesn't matter whether you leave somebody on the rink to guard your head. If you stop a game because of rain, then the game is stopped, and any end that's in progress will be replayed when you resume that game. And I will remember from Gold Coast, Mark, when we had that massive downpour. We got up and we had a massive downpour, and we were off for 20, 30 minutes, I guess. And
I suppose the big difference over here, Alan, is you know, we don't get as much rain as such, and of course, most of us over here, because due to the weather, don't have wet weather gear, so. Soon as the slightest ounce of droplets come out of the sky, mate, they jump off the green and stand under cover. So, and a lot of people think at that time that the controlling body is, you know, or the umpires have stopped the game, and all they've done is gone off for a quick shower for, you know, while the shower's happening for 1 or 2 minutes, and then they come back. Now, some people then question whether or not, you know, the ends are dead or you continue playing. So, they're the type of things that. We get over here in regard to that sort of situation.
Sure, and there's a very clear distinction between one law that says you can leave the green for up to 10 minutes for
10 minutes.
reason
Yeah.
with permission,
Yeah.
and then continue the game, and then actually stopping the game. And one thing we do tell umpires over here, certainly in training processes, is if they are going to stop a game, they need to make that announcement. They need to clearly say that the game is stopped for whatever reason.
Correct.
So that then there's no doubt then in players' mind that when they do go back on, they have to replay the end.
That's
So yeah, thanks, Bill, for that question. I hope that helps answer that one.
I always remember you talk about the one from the Gold Coast. I remember World Bowls 2008 over in New Zealand, and it was a semi-final. Aaron Sheriff was playing one of the New Zealand players. Aaron was in front, so the New Zealand player went off for 9.5 minutes to the toilet, and then as he came back, Aaron decided he'd go for 9.5 minutes. Lucky there was no time limits being played at that particular time, but they were playing funny buggers together, that's for sure. So
they'll be on the stop clock by now nowadays.
Exactly. Maybe that's why it was brought in.
Yeah. Okay. Brian Airley. I've got a couple of questions for Brian, so we'll deal with this one first because it's easy. So Brian's just come on, a fellow ITO, has been to 2 Commonwealth Games with us, Mark, and he simply asked minimum length jacks, and I'm not sure whether there's a bit of a follow-on to that question because it's a bit of a short one for him. But minimum length jacks were clearly the minimum delivered length for a jack is 23 metres within the laws of the sport, and I'm sure you'll cover this again in a minute, Mark. And for a rebounding jack, it's 20 metres. I believe a lot of domestic games in Australia, you played at 21-metre jacks.
Yeah, we're the only country now. It was New Zealand as well, but we're the only country now that has 21 metres as a minimum length. And the major reason that we do that is we have a lot of short greens over here. So some of our greens may only be 32, 34 metres long. So by the time you take your 2 metres off at each end, and if we played to 23 metres, we'd only had maybe 7 metres worth of between a minimum and the long jacks, or a long length. So to counteract that, we've made it a 21 metre. We went back to 21 metres, and that gave us at least 9 metres on the very shortest green that we have between minimum and maximum. So, but we do have a lot of those sort of greens around, stuck in the middle of suburbia, in between houses and all that, where there wasn't enough room to build 40-metre greens. So that was one of the main reasons we went back to 21. So yeah, we're the only country that run that now.
Sure, and when you talk about that distance between the minimum length jack and the tee, if you're familiar with the World Bowls Tour portable rink, for the indoor game over here,
Yep.
We're playing to 3-metre tees either end, and still a 23-metre jack. So, and the rink is only 36, I think it is 35.5, something like that. So, there's not a lot of space between the minimum jack and minimum length jack and the tee.
And it doesn't allow for any tactics. That's the difference. Having the more you can give them, the more tactics you can bring into it.
Yeah. Just going back onto the stopping the game, Nigel Hewitson, welcome Nigel, whose decision is it to stop the game? Is it the umpire or the controlling body? Well, it can be both, but it can also be the player's decision to stop it as well on appeal, so to the umpire. Yeah. So it can be both, of course. Hi from New Zealand. There's no name associated with that one, so hi from New Zealand. So just following up on Brian's questions, let's get this one out of the way because this is a stinker.
I thought he was a good umpire giving us the trashes, but some of these questions, Brian.
To be honest, Mark, you should know the answer to this, being a very experienced ITO with 2 Commonwealth Games under his belt. But I'll be interested to hear your response to this. So I'm going to sort of give my take on this one. It's a bit of a complicated scenario, so I'll try and take it slowly. In a rinks game, so we're playing fours. Skip A drives and hits the head. His driven bowl is displaced by an opponent from Team B, who, whilst trying to avoid it, bumps into a member of Team A, who then displaces one of the bowls in motion. Team A team member bumps into Team B team member, who displaces another bowl at rest. All the displaced bowls disturb the head. The interesting thing with the question is that dead ends are not allowed in the conditions of play. What would we do? In summary, I think with that question, you've got multiple displacements going on by both teams, and you're going to be faced with a situation of which bowl hit who, and which bowl then went on to displace something else. And quite often with these things, and whilst it says dead ends are not allowed in the conditions of play, my take on this is that there are occasions where you may just have to call a dead end, and these things won't get resolved unless you do. Trying to rebuild that head as per the laws, the opposition replacing the opposition bowls and going backwards and forwards is, just seeing it in my mind's eye is going to be very, very difficult. So I would suggest on this occasion the fairest and most sensible option here will be to replay the end. I don't know whether you've got any different thoughts to that, Mark.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely, mate. The problem we have over here is a lot of people who make up the conditions of play for, say, tournament play, whereby they want to have 4 games of 10 or 12 ends in a day, etc. Might be a bowls coordinator or a tournament director or something like that. They make up the conditions of play and they put no dead ends, jack to be respotted on the tee. Now, we all understand what they want. They want to keep to a schedule and keep it nice and tight so that everyone finishes at the same time, all those sorts of things. So what they're saying, what they really don't want is any out of bounds that just gets put on the tee. Now, the problem, what should be said, there should be no dead jacks.
Yeah.
And that's what should be written into the conditions of play, that no dead jacks re-spotter on the tee.
Yeah.
Because we know due to displacement laws, there are going to be dead ends. So, and you can't really, then suddenly if you're holding 4 or 5 shots and the conditions of play say there's no dead ends, I'm just going to go and disturb the whole end and it's going to be put on the tee where my bowl is and away you go.
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to a lot of the wording put into some of these conditions of play, and quite often they're not put in by people who know what they should be putting in, whether proper umpires or whatever. So I always find that a big problem.
Totally agree. And just expanding on that, we've had a number of questions come through over a period of weeks, and it's a favoured question for umpires exams and things like that. Is how many instances of a dead bowl can you have within the laws of the sport? And I thought, we've got something like 30 odd people joining us at the moment. I thought it'd be nice just to get a bit of interaction from people and see what they feel the number of dead bowl situations there can be. So I'm just going to pop up a poll. It'll pop up on your screen, and we're looking for the answer. How many instances within the laws of the sport can a bowl be declared dead? So we're not talking about ends here, but similar lines. We're talking about declared bowls being declared dead. So I'll just pop this up on the screen, and it'd be interesting to see what the answers are, Mark. Because just give you a few minutes. You should see it pop up on your screen. Just click one of the options, and let us know how many instances you think there are within the laws.
Because you're putting pressure on the attendees. No?
Yeah, make them work for their money.
Exactly.
So if you can see that pop up on your screen, just hit the option. Yeah, we've got a few results coming in now.
Well, while that's happening, Alan, I'll just answer Brian's question. He said, if I was playing 21-metre jacks, does the 14 minimum for minimum length for delivered bowl change? No, it doesn't. It stays at the 14. But for the rebounding jack, it goes from 20 to 18, and then of course the 23 to 21 for the minimum length jack. So, but the dead bowl, the live bowl still starts at the 14.
Yeah, and note that minimum length jack, the 21 metres, is written into your domestic regulations.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, give a couple more seconds just for a few more people to pop in there. Just enter your answer. It's close, Mark. Okay.
And just answering Alistair's question too, in regard to no dead ends in the condition of the play only applies to the jack being knocked out of play. you can still have technical dead end. No doubt you can, but most people who make up these conditions of play, or the players themselves, just read it as no dead ends whatsoever, and that's where the problem lies. By putting no dead jacks in, that allows the technical dead ends to occur then.
Yeah. Okay, we'll end this poll now. Thank you for voting. We'll have a look at the results here. So you should shortly see the results pop up there. Majority of people, 32% of you, going for seven instances. Interesting. There's more than that. So there is one law that that gives a list of the instances of dead bowls, but there are other laws, obviously, there that specify that a dead bowl can be declared dead, such as, for example, the penalty in foot faulting or the penalty in rink possession. And as you mentioned, Mark, some of the displacement situations, you may well have dead ends and dead bowls in that. So overall, the number of instances of a bowl being declared dead is actually 11. There's 11 times in the laws where you can declare a bowl dead. So well done to the three of you that got the 11 correctly.
Yeah, put your name up on the Q&A who got it right. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Working through some of these. So hi from New Zealand with Steve Sargent, our mate Sarge. So welcome, Steve, and glad you could join us this evening. I know it's late for you, so thanks for popping online. You answered Alistair's, didn't you? Yeah, we got that one out of the way. Okay. We've got a question here from Wen Lim. Welcome. Technology has advanced so fast that electronic devices have become so sophisticated. What is your view on the use of electronic devices, not as a means of communication between players with hearing disability, but other purposes such as coaching? And that's a really, really interesting question, Wayne, because it's quite topical actually, because you may or may not know that the laws of the sport were recently amended slightly. And one of the laws that we amended was relating to electronic devices and their use. And we took out the specific part about players with disabilities using them. So it's quite a topical subject at the moment. My view, it's the modern world. As long as you're not on the phone to your partners and everything when you're playing a big competition, I really don't see a big issue in communication between coaches and everything. Now, that may be a bit of a controversial view, but my view is at some point a coach is going to communicate with their players on the rink. And Mike, you're a coach, a well-renowned coach in Victoria and Tasmania, so the communication methods that you use in tournaments and things like that are developing so quickly now that it's likely that you're going to be using headsets, you're going to be using mobile communications, and may not be even on the green that the players is going on. And I can recall from Glasgow in 2014 when David Gourlay was the Scotland coach, he'd be sitting in the stand and he'd be communicating with his on-rink coaches across 3 or 4 greens.
Yeah, correct. Scotland and Australia, since Glasgow, have all been using those communication devices where they speak from one green to another green. How's it going over there, etc. And watching, as I said, from the stand, seeing a different aspect or a different view of how the player is playing and reacting. So from that point of view, within the coaches, that's certainly taken off. And even Wings, what he's trying to say now is that, people have got wristwatches and all that sort of stuff that are phones and all that. So half the time you wouldn't know whether or not a coach on the outside is actually sending a message, play your forehand all the time, or, to the wristwatch. It'd be very hard to pick up, But as you say, Alan, it's the changing world, it's the electronic world. And not only for those sort of things, but and we've only just been talking about laser measures, and you have in the last Q&A, and that's it's certainly where the world's going, and we have to move with it, I think.
Yeah, and it's not just we're not just talking about coaching and communication with players here. With coaches, we're mobile communication on the rink itself is to me, having a player using their phone on the rink is a little bit disrespectful, but it's moving fast, this whole communication thing. And actually, just recently, there's been a number of discussions about various apps and things to help players. There's a fantastic scorecard app that you can get now, which is smart enough to then communicate the scorecard live to the tournament office or screens or whatever. And if you're a marker on the rink and you've got a mobile phone using that app, then happy days. You're not going.
And that's the same with the concentric circles to see who's got shot by hovering, all those sort of things.
Yeah, and I've actually recently found, if you guys want to look it up, there's an app called Bowlometer. It's actually designed for the pétanque and boule sports. It's a French design, but I've practiced with it for measuring, and you're basically taking a photograph of the head using some stabilization circles, taking a photograph of the head, centering the jack, moving the pointers to each bowl, and it tells you the result. And I've tried it indoors with some pretty tight caliper measures and box measures, and it's been pretty spot on.
Okay.
Things are moving forward, and we've talked about lasers a lot at world level and obviously national level as well. These are the sort of things that are coming along now.
Correct.
So a great question, Wayne. Thank you for that. Stephen's just followed up. What would be the ruling if one team was using a walkie-talkie and the other team objected? Now, I'm aware that I believe Stephen's involved in the visual impairment sport as well, which does cover communications. Whether one team objected or not, I'm not sure whether there would be any grounds for an objection in those environments, to be honest.
Well, I said they can have any help they like virtually from a disability point of view. So, I wouldn't have thought there'd be too much. But, walkie-talkies, in the conditions of play in Australia, quite often they put about the electronic devices and not being allowed on the green and those sort of things. So, but yeah, in a disability side of things, I wouldn't think there'd be any objections as such.
Yeah. Okay. So again, welcome. Thank you for sticking with us with this. We're if you've got any questions, you've been burning to ask myself or Mark from an Australian perspective, please just hit the Q&A button and type in your question, and we'll do our best to answer it live for you. There is one that came in during the week, which is, let me see where it is. It's from Ted Atkinson. I'm sorry, I'm looking up. I've got the questions posted on my window. So we got Ted Atkinson's asked. Greens are supposed to be level and flat. On outdoor rinks, the green sometimes slopes towards the gutter ditch. Some clubs do not cut the grass in this area as short as the rest of the green. I'm guessing that's not something you encounter in Australia, Mark. Your greens are pretty.
When I read the question, Alan, I thought, well, that doesn't happen here. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's all our dodgy greens. So yeah, I mean, taking Australia aside and the Southern Hemisphere, where it's a different type of surface. It's there's a lot of money out there to spend on greens.
And they're lasered right up to the edges, so absolutely. Everything's fairly flat. Look, what you do to get the occasional one or two around that are sloped towards the ditch, but on the whole, what's in the middle of the green is what's on the end of the green as far as the length of the grass and all that sort of thing. So we don't cut that too much.
I mean, I think quite often over here, what we see is greenkeepers trying to protect the edges where people step onto the rink, and they try and protect a strip of, I don't know, probably 2-3 feet of the edge of the rink, and just leave the grass slightly longer. I mean, we've seen some that are ridiculously long, but they just leave it slightly longer as an edge. generally, they don't normally have the effect of stopping anything from going in the ditch, or it's not that long. But sometimes where you've got the damage and you've got people stepping onto the rink, you get that sort of sinking on the edge, and you get a run down into the ditch, which is always a bit of a problem. Certainly in competition, when you've got a jack in the ditch and you try and draw to the edge of the rink and it runs off by a foot. So it's a bit of a problem. In terms from our perspective as officials, there's very little we can do about it. It's very similar to having a ditch that's too small or too big. We're not going to carry a shovel in our car boot and dig the ditch out or fill it in with sand. So there's very little you can do in terms of a competition when you're officiating. But we do have a mechanism, certainly in most of the home countries here, where we can report those greens to the various controlling bodies that are running competitions on them, and they'll make a decision whether to play further competitions on them, or make a recommendation for the club to improve it. We do have in certain counties here, I think we do have green inspectors as well that go around and just look at suitability for venues for competition play.
And that's exactly what we have here. We have a greens committee as part of each of the associations in each state, where they go around and check they give them a rating of A, B or C or whatever it is, and A will allowed to have state or interstate sort of competitions, and then B will only for local competitions or whatever it is. So and it all comes into it as far as how they see the green, how the green's been prepared, they patches on it, all those sort of things, and of course running towards the ditch is certainly part of that as well. So
yeah, sure. So thank you for that question, Ted. I hope that covers that off for you. Great question. We had another one from our friend Brian from Scotland, talking about replacing markers, and I've had first-hand experience of this as well. So it's a bit of a topical question for me, Brian. So thank you for this. In a singles game, the marker is very slow getting up and down the green, talking to the spectators and giving inaccurate information. It's annoying both players. They approach you as the umpire and both ask to have the marker replaced. First thing to say about this, we're all volunteers in this sport, and to get a marker at club ties is like drawing blood sometimes. So we're often grateful for anybody that can come up and mark a singles tie. But that aside, you do see markers that aren't up to scratch, and it's inevitable. We're not all perfect, clearly, but you're going to get people that either haven't had the relevant training, are only there for a cup of tea, and really can't be bothered. But certainly in competition games, competition ties, we would certainly recommend having a marker that's been through some sort of training, some sort of qualification for marking, and knows what they're doing and is taking it seriously. But it's inevitable you're going to get a few that aren't. I have come across a situation where the marker hasn't performed as well as they could. We didn't actually take them off the rink, but it did result in the game being replayed. And I talked about this in an earlier Q&A way back whenever we went into lockdown, where we ended up replaying the game because the score on the card was completely wrong. And actually 3 or 4 ends previous to the end of the game, the person that didn't win should have won. So we do get this, and we do get this situation. In my view, if players are really not happy with the marker, and you have somebody else available to step in, then I don't see it as being unacceptable not to replace that marker if it's affecting the game. I've said all along, a marker can make or break a game of singles. A good one can really make the game flow. A bad one can just ruin a game. So replacing markers is not something we like doing, but it's something that can be done if we need to.
Yeah, sometimes it's a necessary evil. Sometimes, as you say, at local level or club level, you get them out the bar and all that, and well, that's what we're going to cop at that local level. When you get up a little bit higher, county or state over here and that sort of thing, you're expecting some sort of training. And our National Officiating Committee, we have a marking module for people to take, so they have a fair idea what they should be doing. But those who don't take it and then suddenly are thrust into a Vic Open or something like that and do a bad job, then the players are entitled, they're putting up money to win a title, and they should be entitled to, at least a reasonable marking standard from a yes, a volunteer, but a reasonable marking standard. So, and they're more embarrassed that they've been taken off the green than the two players who have asked them to take off the green. So they sort of say, well, I better do the right thing, So there's a two-way street with it.
Absolutely, yeah. So thanks, Brian, for all your questions today. Much appreciated. Again, if you've got any further questions to pose to either Mark or myself, just pop them in the Q&A box. We've got a few minutes left. There was one topic I wanted to sort of cover with Mark, because it has been asked before about different formats of the sport and how the sport's developing and moving forward. And many of you will be aware of the Australian Premier League and the Ultimate Bowls Championships, UBC and APL, which are staged in Australia, and how forward thinking they are. I just wanted to get your take, Mark, on, I know you've been involved in the officiating of some of these events, and I just wanted to get your take on your feelings about the APL, UBC, and how they are moving the game forward.
Yeah, look, very much. I was lucky enough that I made the conditions of play for the BPL, or the APL as it was known in the first one. And what Bowls Australia actually wanted us to do was come up with some sort of format that was going to be exciting for television, and that was the whole crux of the matter. And that's where the spots, we took out the rolling of the jack, put the spots in, etc. And if the jack went off, it didn't go back in the 2 metre mark. We had another spot that was 1 metre from the ditch. So all those sort of things that made it really exciting from a television point of view. And Mark Casey then now with the UBC has taken it even a step further, whereby he's come up with a very unique scoring system. And you can get on and look up UBC and look up what you get. But basically you get certain points for touches, no matter what level, whether it's the lead or the skip. You get points for being, after the leads bowls are down, you get an extra points for being who holds the shot, all those sorts of things. So it's always something happening. So it's not, the last 2 bowls of the skip are going to make or break the game. So you can actually help the team by scoring more during the actual end. So look, it's fast paced, and I think it's good for television, and I think a lot of people like watching it. I don't know whether a lot of people, apart from the people playing in them, would like to play them from a competition point of view, you know. But certainly from a television point of view, it's brought a younger market into the game. Yeah.
And I mean, do you see that going outside of Australia? I mean, there's various conversations going on online with I guess just casual conversations going on about, we must bring this over to the UK, we must get this over to wherever.
Well, I think it was going to Hong Kong there at one stage, wasn't it? Or
the UBC, yeah.
The UBC was, yeah. So look, there's no reason why it can't.
Yeah.
I think the traditional side of bowls, that's great for all of us to play it, but if you're going to get a new market or a new audience coming in via TV, then you need something that's going to be fast-paced like the 2020 of cricket, and this sort of brings it in for bowls.
Sure, and it's all about image. It's a great format to watch. It's quick, it's sharp, it's punchy, and it's a really good image. And I think that also brings on to the question about officials. I'm not saying that we're a bad image, but we're no spring chickens. But
I can't dye my hair, mate.
The officials that are used in UBC, are they players? They're junior players, or are they trained officials? How do they get?
Look, it was something that Bowls Australia wanted. They wanted a younger, not only playing personnel, but they also wanted the officiating a little bit younger as well, and some of them are our under 25 juniors and who will learn, how to work the computers on the green as they punch in the figures for who gets shots and all those sort of things, or who gets touches. So it's a younger looking audience all round rather than just the players.
Sure. Yeah. And, the key message to anybody that wants to take up officiating, if, you don't need to be of a certain age or retired or anything to do that. You can take it up at any age you want. I was 21 when I started. And, the younger officials coming through, we really do need them because, us guys aren't going to last forever.
Sooner or later, we're going to drop off the perch, mate.
Going to drop our calipers at some point. And I guess that kind of leads me on to something I mentioned right at the start of this when we were talking about Commonwealth Games and World Championships and the officiating program that we have at world level, and that's the international technical officials. And we've talked about this in previous streams before, but I think it's worth just reiterating that the ITO process is a World Bowls driven program. It's an accreditation program that both you and I, Mark, are heavily involved in, and it's open to anybody that has the relevant experience and fits the criteria for application. And we have Birmingham 2022 coming up, which is an ideal opportunity for officials coming through. Having said that, there's only going to be a limited number of people selected for that event from the ITO panel. I think we've got something in the region of 80 to 100 ITOs currently worldwide. We're probably only looking for 36 to 40 officials for Birmingham. But if there's people that are keen and very diligent and have the relevant experience and get the application in, and clearly at the moment with the whole coronavirus situation, we're not planning to run any accreditation processes just yet until we know when we'll come out of lockdown and whether we go into second waves and everything else. Because it is a one-to-one process, and so get the applications in, and we'll try and figure something out before we get to 22.
And there's something that I've been doing lately, Alan, is I was headhunted back in 2000 for the 2006 games, so 6 years beforehand, and I've sort of been keeping my eyes and ears open and sort of asking people, I think you'd be a very good ITO, and just need to match the criteria, and we'll see if we can put you through an assessment and see how you go. So they're the type of things, I think you and I and others at a fairly high level need to be on the lookout for the next generation coming through.
Yeah. And that, that's across the space. It's not just for Commonwealth Games and World Bowls level stuff. That's across the board. For new people coming through at national level, for new people coming through at international level.
Well, we've been lucky here in Australia over the last 10 years. We've had a number of major events, etc. Besides the Common Games and those sort of things, World Bowls. We have the Australian Open, which is over 13 various clubs. Vic Open's over 15 clubs. So, our ITOs get quite a bit of work at the highest level with a lot of the top bowlers who either live here or visit here. So we're very lucky in that regard that we've got all that officiating going on. So that's why we're always on the lookout for more and younger and new ones coming through, so that when the natural attrition happens, we've still got people to take over as we go.
Sure. And certainly there's a comment coming in from Anne from New Zealand, who has officiated at the highest level as an ITO, but she does say the same ITOs seem to be chosen all the time. And any selection, whether it's for a national squad or for officials, is always going to be a very, very tough process. And there are let's take Commonwealth for example. There are very strict criteria for selecting officials at Commonwealth Games. There's a certain percentage coming from the home nations, there's a certain percentage coming from overseas, plus there's a gender split as well. So the Commonwealth Games Federation are very clear in that they want a 50-50 gender split. So any selection is going to be challenging. If you get 80 applications for a Commonwealth Games and you only want 36 people, it's going to be some disappointed people there. And yes, and there is likely to be the same people attending. A lot of it comes down to experience. A lot of it comes down to being the best at what they are. I can't put it any more raw than that. It really is that, Mark. And
we do have an assessment process now that happens at events, as you've spoken about previously, and that certainly helps in selecting future ones as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we're approaching the hour now. I know Mark's getting tired and way past your bedtime.
Not my bedtime.
So just wrapping up a few other comments coming in. Brian's just clarified what the situation with removing that marker. So thank you for clarifying that side of things. Just a couple of other comments coming through. Stephen, extreme bowls format that started in Scotland now spread to England is similar. Points for best lead, points for bowl after all bowls, points for touches. So yeah, there's formats going on. UVC is an exciting format. So there's different things coming in, and that's great to see. So thank you all for popping in this morning and or this evening or tonight, popping in and joining us and asking your questions. I hope this session's been really useful for everybody. It's been a great discussion with Mark, getting an Australian perspective as well. So I'd like to thank Mark very much for popping in, buddy, and great to see you online.
Pleasure being here, mate.
So thank you everybody for joining. The recording of this will be up on my Facebook page hopefully this afternoon. I'll try and get it done. So for you guys, it'll be there in the morning. And thank you all. Be safe still. I think in this country, God help us, we are madness ensues today. Pubs are open, so it's legging it down the pub today. So we're heading for a second wave, I think. But please, everybody, clubs are starting to open now. Things are starting to move. Certainly in some countries in the UK. I know Mark before the stream mentioned that Victoria's struggling with a second wave, possibly, and we've all got to be safe. So let's keep safe and look forward to getting back out on the rinks whenever we can and whenever it is safe. And certainly for your club competitions and your national competitions, they'll still be there when we're finished. The World Championships isn't going away, Mark. You're still going to get there.
Well, that's the other thing. It could be another, without preempting anything, there could be another setback yet. So, yeah. There's no guarantee it's going to be June next year, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining. Stay safe and hopefully speak to you all again very soon.
Thanks. See you.